All right.
How are you?
I'm fine. How are you? Are you awake?
We're getting up.
I do not envy you and all the times you have to talk to America.
Yeah, look, this is unusual.
Good. It should be unusual.
Uh-huh.
I hope you're at least still wearing pajama pants.
No, actually, we're consciously dressed because, you never know, at some point I want to say, I want to go and show you something from my bookcase, and
I guess.
anyway. But we felt good about the first one.
Yeah, agree. I see the second Naamah Kelman coming in here.
Right, so that's for the breakout. We'll be together.
Yeah. So she'll be on the other one, and you'll be on that one.
Yeah, so I think what she's going to do, Nami, unmute yourself. She will keep this this Naamah Kelman one open with the camera off.
Great. Okay.
And then she'll just run to it when the breakout.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's still worth testing, like in terms of the light, because now you look a little dark.
I do. 1 second. That better?
Yeah, a lot better.
Yeah, much better.
Okay. Wait a second. Let me share screen. Okay. I have to. Okay.
Okay, I'll do this. I'll do the same.
All right. Should I turn the volume off? I'll just close the door. All right. I'm moving to you, Elan. All right.
Yeah. No, you sound okay now.
Yeah.
Just when you come here, close your door.
Hi.
Hi.
Now, okay. Now let's. This is actually important because here we also interact. Are we a little dark here?
No, actually you're good. I can see both of you. Sorry, the dog has decided that now is the time to play.
Rachel,
Yeah.
who's moderating each of our groups? Do you know? Is Ike Serrata doing me or Elan?
I believe it's Ike for you. And I think the last I heard it was Larry for you, Elan.
Larry Edwards, Rabbi Larry Edwards. I see. Okay.
Yeah, but it could change in the middle of you guys talking, and who knows?
Okay.
Can you put us in the big screen for a second?
Yeah, I think we have. Oh, yep, we've got 3, so I can spotlight you.
Yeah, this is.
Oh my God, look our.
Well, it looks dark there for a reason.
Yeah.
You don't look dark, but the world looks dark.
We have to look awake.
Do we look awake?
Keep drinking the coffee.
Yeah. Right. So yeah.
Oh, with a Zabar's coffee cup.
Yeah.
What would be
You're channeling your New Yorker.
Chicago,
What's the Chicago equivalent of Zabar's coffee cup?
Ooh, I don't know.
Uno, pizza Una. Pizza Uno.
Maybe.
Did you hear any nice feedback, members of your congregation from the,
Everyone I've spoken to said that it was great.
Okay.
That they really enjoyed hearing you guys speak to each other and that the breakout rooms were good. There was just, yeah, I got a couple other panicked texts when your internet dropped out for a second, but
yeah,
you got back pretty quickly, so.
yeah, I wonder if I do that. Yeah. I wonder if you send me a link to my phone now. If I can you send me a link?
To your,
In case I drop off, I can always try and get on my phone.
oh, send a link to the Zoom through your phone.
No, or just send an email. I can click it on the email. You know what I'm saying?
Sure, okay. New email,
Or to my WhatsApp. Yeah.
whichever one's easier. I can send it to
I think
both.
WhatsApp, and then that, yeah, and then if I,
Okay.
Great.
Give me a second just to open WhatsApp on my computer.
Okay.
That one. Do, 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 do.
Here's the timetable. Same thing. We have to be done by 7:15, the latest. Go a little longer. Rachel, do you know Tal Rosen, the fundraiser, the HUC fundraiser? Does that name mean anything?
Only by name, not actually directly.
Okay, he was on the call,
Oh, nice.
so I had a little exchange with him.
Great. Okay. Sorry.
Okay, let's get to.
My phone's not here.
Yeah. So he wrote to me that he feels very frustrating being a liberal Zionist, and he said, it's not exhausting as it is for you, but it's pretty exhausting.
Well, you kind of live it every single day. It's a little
Yeah.
bit easier for us in America to turn it off for half a second.
Unfortunately, you have your own battles now. It's very scary.
Yes. And actually, I'm looking for other co-hosts, but I don't see them yet. People are logging on much earlier than they were in the morning.
Really?
Our morning, your afternoon.
The 14 now?
Wow. Some
Thank
eager
you for
beavers.
all participants.
Yeah, nice.
We should have more people tonight for this one than we did for the other one.
Really?
Yeah. For the other one, it looked like at the most we had 145 screens.
Yeah, because sometimes couples.
Right. It's hard to tell how many individuals, but screens we had 145. And I think
That's amazing. I have to say.
we should have, if everyone who registered actually shows up,
Yeah.
probably just around 200.
Whoa.
No pressure though. No pressure.
Oh, God. Well.
Just have to be as enthusiastic as we were the first time.
That's not my problem, enthusiasm.
At 3:30 a.m.
I'm feeling, I feel like I really feel like I'm getting on a flight to go somewhere.
Yeah.
This is when you get up at these hours. So like,
Yeah,
where
are we going? Are we
O'Hare.
going to Paris?
We're going on our way. There's direct flights to Chicago now.
There are. You mean
Hello.
pandemic people?
United.
Maybe El Al now flies directly to Chicago and
No,
United.
I'm not sure about that.
Oh, United. My sister just did that.
No,
Hi.
hi, good evening, good morning. I'm not sure what it is.
3:30 a.m.
Don't ask.
Don't ask.
Okay.
But it feels like we're going to the airport. Which
Yeah. Yeah. No, I understand. Well, the good news is you get to go back to sleep.
Yeah, I don't know, I was so buzzing after last time, I couldn't fall asleep for a long time.
Yeah, yeah.
So it was pretty,
Anyway, it's good to see you again.
yeah, good feeling.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Well, it's great to have you back. I thought yesterday went really, really well. The technical glitch aside, I think hopefully we'll the internet gods
Unfortunately,
will
it
be
was
on our
on
side.
our side, it was my
Yeah.
side. My,
Yeah.
but I have a backup. This time I'll just go straight into my phone,
Okay.
so if I
Yeah.
have.
All right.
And then if that happens,
Send me the link onto my WhatsApp.
just saying, if I have to, I'll call Rachel and you'll have to back up me up with my PowerPoint. That's
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, that's fine. Well, now that you planned for it, it won't happen.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know why, but
Yes.
glitches, part of life, but sometimes they're worse than others.
So
I
I'm
don't know
going to
if
let
you heard-
in. I see Larry Edwards is in, so going to let him in.
I was just gonna ask that. Great.
Okay, and I haven't
Well,
seen
what-
Ike yet.
We'll both share.
All right. We still got a couple minutes. Before I forget, I'm gonna turn off participants' ability to unmute themselves. But all of you are co-hosts, so
Right.
enjoy making sounds.
Okay. Okay.
And Rabbi Cohen, you want Rabbi Edwards with Dr. Ezrachi, right?
Yes. Yeah. Larry, you'll do the breakout room with Dr. Ezrachi,
That'll
and
be fine.
Ike Sarada is going to do it with Rabbi Kelman. Help
Great.
lead that.
Good.
Good.
Good. Sounds good.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, welcome aboard.
What do you think Sisters in Crime New England is?
I have no idea.
Oh dear, that's someone?
Yeah.
Elan said someone logged in from Haifa, who's
Wow.
formerly an Ole, Vatik from Chicago. Somehow.
Not so bad. He said he's in Haifa for 15 years and he's in his 60s, retired and a member of a Reform congregation in Haifa. So I assume he's also keeping some affiliation in his former synagogue in Chicago. And
Yeah.
that's how you know about the program.
Nice.
Cool.
Nice.
So things went really well yesterday, I thought.
Yes. Agree.
Wow, I can't
Okay.
believe you're doing this twice. That we have to do it twice, okay, but that you have to do it twice.
Well,
Really, that
Yeah.
is really beyond the call.
Paul and Rachel have to do it twice.
So,
Well, I'm sure you'll add new things tonight or this morning.
It's like those puzzles where you have to do the comparison. Can you spot the
yeah.
difference? Yeah, that's what we're gonna do.
Right.
Change one little piece of your backstory and we'll see if we can figure out what it is.
There's Ike. I'm going to let Ike in.
Great.
I'm wearing a different shirt.
Oh, good.
Good.
But you're still in Haifa.
No?
Oh, no,
No,
you're back
now
in
we're together.
Yerushalayim. Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Together in the same.
Oh, that's
it
not a
looks
split
like we're in the
screen.
same-
That's two of you.
It's true. It looks like a split
That looks like a split
actually.
screen because of the door,
Yeah,
the
yeah.
doorpost.
Yeah.
It's a wall, actually.
Hi, Ike. Can you hear us?
Yeah.
Great.
So Rabbi Serrata, you have the ability to unmute yourself and everything because you're a co-host.
Great, thank you very much. It's nice to see you, Rachel. Hi, it's nice to see you
Hi.
guys. Thanks for getting up or staying up, whatever you did to be with us tonight.
We
Both.
both. we sang. It feels like we're going to the airport.
Yeah, right.
All right.
We get up at these hours. So we kind
So-
of have that adrenaline.
So we might continue from here to Paris.
Nice.
What did they say? Inkvar Asfar? Asfar Inkvar?
Imkvar Asklov.
Yeah.
Elan, just as a heads up, I think I'm with you for the breakout session, and I was thinking of opening up with just a question. I know you've written a whole book, I guess, a whole study of Yerushalayim, the complexity of the city after 50 plus years of unification, occupation.
Right. Fill in the blank.
So I was just going to ask you maybe to open with the breakout session, maybe with some remarks about beyond what you say in your general opening, the current complexity of Jerusalem and
Yep.
How many,
I thought
how
that
many
might-
hours do I have for that?
you have about
And that will be our
3
next
minutes.
session.
Okay, so you can definitely point that out in your opening statement.
Great.
Now, I'll try and come up. I'll try and tie in the question of the complexity of Jerusalem to our topic somehow.
And
Yeah.
I know there are many NGOs working from various perspectives, and I don't know how specific you want to get, but I was going to ask you if there are some you feel particularly close to, because I think of that as another way for people to connect to Israel, to say, I think Ir Amim is doing important work, or this group or that group, and I want to support them.
Absolutely.
And by the way, the first director of Ir Amim lived in Chicago for a few years. You know him?
I don't
Was,
think so.
he was married to the consul general, and I say was because after that they split. His name is Amos Gil. Do you remember Orly Gil?
Yeah, I do. Yes, I remember the name for sure.
Her ex-husband is the
Wow.
founding director of Ir Amim,
Wow.
and a close friend.
Aha.
So he was in Chicago with her.
Aha. All right.
Yeah.
This is some real inside baseball, we would call it here. Like.
All right. Yep, I
Okay.
see Andrea London now. I'm gonna let her in.
So
Okay,
we'll
good.
end the small talk now and be ready for
No, we can.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're very, very.
the time.
I'm
Oh, I
gonna mute,
know, I know,
I'm
I
gonna
know.
mute myself until the breakout session, I think. But
Okay.
Okay.
great to see you.
But Paul, you can do a little, small talk as they enter if you want, or.
Wanna
Little
sing for
smart
everybody.
Torah.
Hi.
Hi. Hi, Andrea.
You're together
Thank you.
tonight.
Yeah.
The middle of the night, I guess there, so I hope so.
Yep. How else could we get up? Yeah, we had to wake each other up.
Oh my gosh. What is
3
it?
alarm clocks, 4 phones.
Right. And guess what?
iPads.
We got up ourselves. You know how it is.
Right.
Yeah.
When you have an early morning flight and you get up 25 times because you're
That's
afraid you're
right.
going to miss all those alarms, right?
Exactly.
All right, should I start letting people in?
Yeah,
Sure.
why don't we? We've got
30.
everybody here, so yeah.
Admit all.
Make sure your throat is clear.
Here they come.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, welcome, everyone.
Put the gallery. Yeah. Nice band. Let me see band. Well. Okay.
Hello, good evening, everyone in the States. Good morning to those of you in Israel. Sorry you're awake quite so early. Just so everyone knows, this session is being recorded. So if you would like to not be recorded, of course, that's an option. All you have to do is turn off your camera and it won't capture you. Other than that, you're all good.
We have a lot of folks joining us tonight. We're so glad to welcome everyone. More and more.
Super punctual group of Jews here.
Yeah.
Amazing. And also, just so everyone knows, we'll have some opportunity to spend time with Rabbi Kelman and Dr. Ezrachi individually in breakout rooms. Everyone will have the ability to choose a room, but you're going to be pre-assigned to one randomly just to make it nice and efficient. If you'd like to switch, all you'll have to do is hit the breakout room button at the bottom of your screen when we go, and you'll be able to switch to the other one.
We'll wait just another minute or two to let everybody come into the program. We're expecting a few more people. So I think we'll continue to, but it looks like we have a majority of the folks here. So Rabbi London, we'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Cohn and Rabbi Heaps from Temple Jeremiah for hosting us this evening. We're so delighted to be with Rabbi Naamah Kelman and Dr. Elan Ezrachi, who will be our teachers and speakers. And it's such an honor to be able to introduce them. They are my friends, and they have been my teachers and mentors over many, many years. And to be together with 36 congregations all joining is really quite something, from all different denominations. A thank you to Aliyah Kotel and to Jonathan Wolf for making this happen as well. So I'd like to introduce our speakers this evening. First, Rabbi Naamah Kelman was born in New York City, the daughter of Rabbi Wolf Kelman, who was a leader in the conservative movement. But of course, all paths lead to Chicago. And so Naamah is a granddaughter of Rabbi Felix Levy of Emmanuel congregation right here in Chicago, who is instrumental in the writing of the Columbus Platform, which for Reform Jews is well known as the 1937 platform that moved the Reform movement closer to being a Zionist movement. Rabbi Kelman has been living in Israel for 40 plus years. She was the first female to be ordained as a rabbi in Israel, and she currently serves as the dean of the Hebrew Union College Jewish Institute of Religion in Jerusalem. Dr. Elan Ezrachi was born and raised in Jerusalem. He's an educator par excellence, and I can speak about that from my own experience. Elan and I met 35 years ago when I was in Israel post-college on a year of service with Project Otzma. And at the time, Dr. Ezrachi was working for Malitz, the Institute for Jewish and Zionist Education. And he was my teacher at that time, and he was the one who turned me on to Jewish and Israeli history and Hebrew, and is one of the reasons that I'm here today. So I've always thanked Dr. Ezrachi for that. He currently has his own consulting firm called Effective Partnerships in Today's Jewish World, and he wrote his dissertation on the dynamics of interaction between American Jews and Israelis, apropos of our topic this evening, which is called Hinei, Israeli and American Jews' Views of Each Other. We're delighted. Thank you so much, Nami and Elan, for waking up in the middle of the night to teach us and to guide us in this conversation today.
Well, good evening. And this is just such a wonderful, exciting gathering of double chai synagogues, really a shot of life. It's so wonderful to see colleagues and friends and family. There's so many people I'd love to be speaking with one-on-one. So really, I'm so excited and so moved to see this us getting together. And we hope that by the end of our presentation, we really will feel, despite Zoom and the distance, Hinei Matov, how good it is to be together and how much we need each other and how much we have impacted on each other. I'll just mention, and Rabbi London mentioned, I'm the granddaughter of Felix Levy. Chicago means a great deal for me. He served Temple Emmanuel for over 50 years. That's what rabbis did then. And his vote at the Central Conference of American Rabbis as its president in 1937 changed the direction of the Reform movement. He broke the tie and helped Reform Judaism face Zion and begin to support the beginnings of the Jewish state. And I look at this gathering and I'm just reminded this wide spectrum of denominations and affiliation, and I remember just how American I am, still am. And my story and Elan's story is a story of American Judaism meeting Israeli Judaism over 45 years, and in many ways a strong metaphor for the subject at hand. We want to introduce the 4 questions that we'll be looking at. So here's a little slide of, I hope everyone can see it. Maybe somehow stereotypically we see each other. And tonight is to break down some of those stereotypes and understand just how much exciting change there has been and challenging changes as well. We're going to look at how we viewed each other growing up, what happened when we actually met in 1976, and how we have each developed in our own parallel ways of activism. And finally, what are the critical issues that we face? At the end of our joint presentation, we'll go into separate groups where, next slide, where I will be focusing on pluralism and the challenge of creating new Israeli Judaism, and Elan will focus on trends in Israeli society, American Jews and Jewish peoplehood. I just want to give a shout out to John Wolf, my cousin, full disclosure, who is and has always been a maestro extraordinaire, pulling us together in harmony, even when we sometimes miss a beat. I'm so thankful to him, and also to Aliyah Cheskis Kotel. And again, so many of my colleagues who were on yesterday and today, who understand why this conversation is so important for us. So Elan, how did you experience American Judaism, American Jews growing up in Jerusalem, the 60s and 70s? Yeah.
So good evening, everybody, and it's wonderful to be here, even if it's 3:30 a.m. In Israel, in Jerusalem. But we are fully awake, and we are so psyched and so charged to be with you. As many of you know, this is the second time we're doing this. And I'd like to say a few things about the second time. First of all, the second time should be better than the first time. And actually, we thought the first time was pretty good. And secondly, we also had a chance to reflect on the experience after we did this in the first time. And I can't tell you how much we were moved by the notion of the coalition that was built in Chicago for this event. It is extraordinary. We do have a lot of experience in speaking and working with American Jewish communities and players, and I think this is a very rare thing. I think it has to do with Chicago, but maybe it also reflects a certain trend in Jewish life today, that we're a little exhausted from fighting with one another, and we need to be together and pool our resources together. Perhaps there's a message here. And if you look at Israeli politics today, there's actually something going on like this on the level of the Israeli government, where people from the extreme right and extreme left are sharing the same cabinet. So maybe we're on to something here. But now I want to go back to our topic and focus on the question of how Israeli and American Jews view each other over time. And this really has to do with our joint and separate biographies that in some ways are interwoven into the bigger question. So I was born, as I was introduced, I was born in Israel in the mid-50s. I do have one unusual biographical element in my background, is that my mother was American. She came in 1949. She grew up in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and at age 21, she showed up in Jerusalem, all excited with the idea that there's a new Jewish state. She wanted to check it out. She came with an open ticket for 1 year. She wasn't sure if she's going to stay here. She met my father, and the rest is history. So in that sense, I do have a sense of the American Jewish experience from my own biography. But that is really where it ends, because I belong to a generation that was born here and grew up and raised and educated in the Israeli system, in which American Jewry was not present. In other words, you were not in my radar screen or in my frame. We grew up very much in the collective thinking of nation building, of the project of Israel. In those years, had a lot to do with of receiving masses of new immigrants from Europe and from the Muslim and Arab countries. It was about building the Israeli economy, the defense system. It was about exploring nationhood and sovereignty for the first time. And American Jewry was not in this picture. Sadly, I would say. There were some Americans who made it to Israel as immigrants, as my mother did, but it was a very small group. Actually, I studied this generation in my academic phase. And also, there are very few Americans who came to Israel as tourists. The whole idea of touring Israel experience, later on what became Taglit, birthright, all these things were just not in the making. So we grew up without knowing who you are, without reading about you, without your inclusion in our literature, theater, budding film industry. Yes, we knew that you were very rich, and we knew that you like us. We knew that you were supportive of the Israeli and the Zionist project, but that was basically the extent of our growing up. And I think everything started to change in 1967 with the spectacular military victory of Israel, and that was something that began to bring us together, and we'll reflect on this in the next round. So what was it like for you,
yes, meanwhile,
Rabbi Kelman, to grow up in the United States, and where was Israel in your imagination, in your reality?
So meanwhile, growing up on the Upper West Side of New York City, a daughter of a very prominent conservative rabbi, Wolf Kelman, one grandfather, my father's father, was a Hasidic Rav, and the other was the Reform rabbi. My father rebelled by marrying the daughter of a prominent Reform rabbi, and yet our home, the DNA was Jewish Peoplehood. Warm and loving family, Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox, and the same is true on the Reform side. So for me, Jewish Peoplehood was everything, and it certainly included Israel. My father oversaw the great expansion of the conservative movement. Those are the great flowering, blossoming, strengthening of the conservative movement, and suburbanization. So, and of course, the beginnings of the civil rights movement. My father marched in Selma, Alabama, with Abraham Joshua Heschel and Martin Luther King. Pope John the 23rd was a hero in our household. Interfaith dialogue. It truly was a flowering of a confident, growing American Judaism, conservative Judaism. Pope post-World War II optimism and hope for really the success of the American Jews. That's the kind of home I grew up. I'll just mention that Judith Kaplan, the daughter of Mordechai Kaplan, lived in our building as well. So I think I got all the bases covered almost. Our home was full every Friday night with guests and very often with Israeli diplomats. And of course, I went to Camp Ramah, where I learned all the Hebrew pioneer songs, and I danced every Israeli folk dance. So for me, Israel was a living, breathing idea. And so when I arrived in Israel, straight from college, also riding the incredible wave of Jewish feminism that was born out of the civil rights movement. And by the way, I was part of a post-1967 trend of many liberal American Jews, particularly from the liberal movements, who really came with all their can-do American spirit to kibbutzim, to Jerusalem, to really bring the American spirit to, to Israel, because that's what we Americans do wherever we go. But I came also, I think, because of my deep and abiding love for the Jewish people. And I arrived the day of the Entebbe rescue. So you can imagine the kind of high that Israel was at when I arrived. But suddenly, for the first time in my life, I was forced to choose, am I secular, Chiloni, or Dati, meaning Orthodox? The whole idea, I was always a Jew, but when I arrived in Israel, somehow this binary definition was very dominant. Also, I did encounter, as Elan said, in Israel that rejected diaspora. It was either on the road to assimilation or anti-Semitism, no future. So I did not come on a mission. I came to work in community organizing, Jewish education, but it became clear that, for example, I had no place to pray, really. And with my can-do American spirit, I helped found the first egalitarian minyan in 1977. When I was invited early to speak at one of the first feminist centers in Tel Aviv, they brought a former Orthodox woman who explained to all gathered, there is no such thing as a religious feminist. You can't be both. You cannot be both. And years later, when I was ordained in 1992, I was told there was no Hebrew word for woman rabbi. I simply could not exist. And I was told that Reform and Conservative Judaism is an American implant and would never take root. So I set off to prove them wrong. But you'll have to wait to hear about my activism. First, we'll hear about Elan's.
We met in 1976, and you can do a lot of midrash on this photograph. But I would say it was a clash of two very distinct identities. Growing up in Israel in what you would call the secular majority, labor Zionist mainstream was really my story. I grew up in Jerusalem in the neighborhood of Rehavia. I went to the famous Gymnasia High School. Was very active in the youth movement, and then went to perhaps what was then considered the elite of the elite, to the Israeli Air Force. And I wasn't ordained. I was after training. I was how would you say? I was labeled an Israeli pilot. In many ways, you can say that this was the ultimate expression of Israeli culture and success. I'm not sure I would say this today as I reflect back. It was just, for me, it was my growing up in the Israel that I knew. And here I meet this American activist in 1976. And that for me was a very, very, very challenging moment of testing my identity. I would also contextualize it that when we met in 76, Israel was already in a different place. It wasn't the same Israel. It wasn't the euphoric sentiment and sense that was going on after 67. It was post 1973. Israel was much less sure of itself, hemorrhaging from the war and from other issues. Many Israelis were asking questions of meaning, of purpose. There was a trend already, a notice trend Israelis leaving Israel and settling in other places in the world. So I was open to challenges in that sense. And I was very much struck by the combination of activism and Jewish activism, liberalism and Jewish liberalism. Those worlds did not connect in my book until then. And I think from that point on, we started working together, both as a couple and also as educators and activists in this field. Shortly afterwards, I started moving into the field of Jewish education, as was mentioned before by Rabbi London, and that to me was a very important piece of my professional growth. One of some of the main principles of my professional development was that I have to use my biographical resources and my strengths, both as a child of an American and now married to an American, to get Israelis move into this field of understanding, appreciating, and working together with Jews around the world. I founded the Charles Bonfim Mifgashim Center. I did my doctorate at the Jewish Theological Seminary and studied the question of encounters with American Jews and Israelis sorry, I need to multitask here with my slides. This is the topic of my dissertation. And the peak perhaps of my experience was that I was the founding CEO of Masa. Masa is the umbrella organization that brings young Jews from all over the world to serve in Israel and to participate in long-term programs, semester and year-long programs. And in many ways, this is the ultimate expression of the type of work and the approach that I was engaged in for many years. I have a nice picture here of Ariel Sharon receiving, just before actually he went into his last coma, receiving participants from Masa programs from all over the world. And he was really one of the first leaders that recognized that Israel needs to move away from you're either making Aliyah or we don't want to talk to you, into something which is much more constructive, interactive, and participatory. And he was very psyched about this program. You see me here as a zealot in the corner here. I'm stressing it with the cursor. So these are some of the key landmarks of my professional development. I'm going to talk later on, particularly in the breakout groups, about my involvement now in teaching Israelis about American Jewry in an academic setting, mostly at the University of Haifa. But I'll move this to Naamah.
As I mentioned, post 1967, we have the wave of American Jewish Olim, who arrived with great sense of urgency and mission, and as feminists, civil rights, pluralism, consumer awareness, and in many ways, whether they came to strengthen democratic structures and enhance pluralism. So in 1976, for example, the first Tali school was founded. Tali was a result of a group of conservative rabbis who moved to French Hill in Jerusalem and realized that they don't like the school system. It's either secular or Orthodox, and therefore they begin what has become a nationwide network of Tali schools. Tali stands for Tigbur Limudei Yahadut, enhancing Jewish content, where Bible isn't studied as just history, but as a living Torah, and their rituals and prayer and focus on Jewish identity. And Elan and I were founders of the first progressive preschool and eventually Tali school that was affiliated with the Reform movement. I also started rabbinical school at that time. And also in 1985, a very important precedent. American Jews are demanding that these fledgling streams of Reform and Conservative, and later on it will include secular initiatives and modern Orthodoxy, that they be funded as well. And so in a sense, the movements are established, and the Reform movement focuses on two things. First of all, it establishes the Israel Religious Action Center, which will begin a series of appeals to the Supreme Court based on the Declaration of Independence, Israel's declaration. We have no constitution, but a very important clause, the 13th clause, calls for no discrimination based on gender, okay, and religion, nationality. And based on that clause, we go ahead and begin to kind of chip away at the Orthodox rabbinate. As many of you know, Israel has an established rabbinate, and the rabbinate controls matters of personal status, marriage, divorce, conversion, burial. And we take on, with the conservative movement, this monopoly, calling for choice in these areas, in marriage and burial, conversion, religious councils. And of course, also at this time, you have Women of the Wall, which is a coalition of across streams, and the beginnings of the synagogue centers that will be built throughout Israel. In some ways, the Reform movement is very much the midwife for many of the rituals, and was out there in the front fighting to changing the way of being Jewish. And that girls can have a bat mitzvah, for example, which is still a minority of young women, although it's changing. So, and here Elan has put the slide, perhaps the culmination of our activism is our very own oldest daughter, who became the 100th, it just worked out that way, Reform rabbi in Israel. And she now serves a non-denominational synagogue in the Galilee, which I'll talk about a little later, what has become a wonderful trend of Hitchachut Yehudit, Israeli Jewish Renaissance, very much, again, influenced by the denominations, by liberal Judaism. So Elan, your activism.
So we're actually coming to the end of this joint phase, and we want to focus more on what is going on now and what are some of the challenges that will also spill over into the breakout rooms. I assume that it is not uncommon in such symposia like we're doing now is to mourn the decline in the relationship between Israel and American Jewry. It does happen, and sometimes we tend to perhaps even enjoy this kind of Gewalt conversation. But actually, my sociological and historical understanding is that things are actually getting better in many ways, in the sense of we had very little contact and engagement in the early stages, and over the years, actually, many avenues and modes of collaboration and interaction have developed. Take, for example, the relationship between the Chicago Jewish community and the Kiryat Gat and Lachish area through Partnership 2000. This is something that developed in the 1990s, and on and on and on. We could talk about new modalities of engagement and interaction. Still, we have to face some serious challenges, and I want to lay out some of the challenges before we break out. We do have a situation that as the generations get younger, or as younger people are coming into the fold, there is a lack of that emotional commitment, that emotional sense of Jewish peoplehood that is an a priori necessary building block of identity. And it's true about both sides. Neither Israelis nor Jews around the world growing up without the memories of critical and formative events in modern Jewish history lack that essential building block of I belong to the Jewish people, and the us is the Jewish people, not Americans or Israelis and so forth. So we need to find ways through education and through spiritual work to build up this kind of connection. Secondly, we are fighting indifference, apathy, lack of interest in history. It's a me generation. We need to work very hard to try and go against this tide. We have developed very effective tools in getting to know the other, but we need to still assume that the other is the other. We're not the same people. We do have differences. We have cultural differences. We're wired differently, and we need to recognize that. Here in Israel, and we have a lot of work to do here in Israel, we have to fight the illiberal trends that affect this question, because the more Israel is illiberal in many areas, politically, socially, religiously, the more difficult it is to have an inclusionary approach to Jewish life outside of Israel, which is much more diverse and perhaps even more liberal. It's also important to try and move away the conversation about Israeli and American Jewry from the conversation about identity politics and issues that are very burning and very central in the American Jewish agenda, but they don't necessarily apply to this thing that we're talking about. And finally, there's no alternative to engagement, to talking, to listening, to working together. And these are the things that all of us as educators and lay people should be investing in. What is your sense of the critical issues that are facing us before we break up?
So again, I want to emphasize, because I think we continue not to know each other well enough, or to make assumptions about each other. And I think the fact that more and more Israelis who've been exposed to American Jewish life understand, yes, we have questions of assimilation and certainly anti-Semitism, but more and more Israelis are discovering a vibrant American Judaism that they didn't know. I say that Israelis tend to come to America when they could travel a lot more and go straight to Niagara Falls and Disneyland, but they won't. And when they go to Europe, if they go to any Jewish sites, there's cemeteries. And just imagine, even though we have many young Israelis going to summer camps, if more and more Israeli families came to our synagogues, our JCCs, our universities, where is vibrant Jewish intellectual. These are the things we really must insist that Israelis be exposed to. So again, because I'm a rabbi, I'll start more with the nechemta, the comfort. I'm amazed. I mean, I came to Israel because of this incredible miracle of the establishment of the state of Israel. And I would say over these 45 years, I've seen an incredible sea change of, and whether it's in weddings and life cycle rituals, and the rise of Orthodox feminism has posed a really exciting challenge to the religious establishment, where it's not just so-called secular Israelis, who, by the way, speak Hebrew and live the Bible and walk the Bible and have Jewish holidays, because that's our national cultural form. And Orthodox are also not monolithic. And so you have a real rise in shifts in Orthodoxy as well. Third generation secular Israelis, as I mentioned, who began to reclaim Jewish texts in the Beit Midrash, have now moved to Beit Tfilah, Batei Tfilah. They've also come back to prayer, which is infused today. Jewish prayer in Israel is infused with songs of the pioneers, as well as piyutim that come out of the Muslim Jews from the Muslim countries. So there are growing percentages of Israelis that want to stop what they believe is religious coercion. There's a rise, of course, and acceptance of the GLBTQ plus community in Israel, particularly in Haifa and Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. And the fact that one of our very own graduates of the Israeli Rabbinic Program is now a member of Knesset, Gilad Karib, is a huge, a huge milestone, because he speaks out of his sense of prophetic Judaism. When he speaks as a rabbi and a lawyer, and unashamed to be, me, you can call it a transplant. I still speak, when I open my mouth in Hebrew, I can't hide it. But he is not, and nor is our daughter, who's absolutely not a foreign transplant. Having said this, of course, there are huge concerns of, I stay up at night, what keeps me up at night is what I feel is terrible racism in Israel, growing messianism, extreme messianism, particularly in the extremes of the settler movement, ongoing sexism and misogyny and patriarchy. We have many, many battles we have to keep fighting. And as Elan mentioned, of course, young liberal Jews of the States, many of them my own students, who come with great passion and care about Black Lives Matter and gender politics and issues of colonialism. And they have some tough questions for Israel. And we have to listen to some of these questions and come up with some really good answers. And we need to do this together. We really need to do this together. So what we've done is open, I think, many, many questions, set a kind of agenda to how do we begin really to knit this feeling of togetherness, of how we look to the future together. I think Corona has shaken up, or here we call it Corona. In the States, it's COVID-19, has shaken all of us deeply. We have to rethink all our models, all our paradigms. So we're in an incredible moment, I think, in Jewish history to do this. And I'll just end with the words of my grandfather, Rabbi Felix Levy, who in the darkest days of World War I, our daughter found his sermon somewhere in 1916, where human history really seems to be at its end. He writes for Parshat Noach, which we read a few weeks ago, how Jews have always been rainbow chasers, looking after the flood, looking for the rainbow, looking for hope, looking for fighting despair. So I have my grandfather's ordination certificate on my wall in my office in Jerusalem, 1907, Hebrew Union College. And anytime I despair, I look at that and I said, he could not imagine the vibrancy of American Jewish life in so many ways, the diversity, nor could he imagine. He came here in 1925 for the opening of Hebrew University, which to him was also an incredible accomplishment. And he could not imagine the kind of Israel. Elan, you want the last word? Okay.
No, I don't want the last word because you always get the last word. But I would like to just close this segment before we break out by reflecting on what we've been doing in this context. Both of us speak a lot and teach a lot, but we don't necessarily bring our personal story in the same way. And I think as we are coming of age, we realized that our personal biographies and our personal narratives are actually symbols of something of a much bigger story. And even though in 1976 we were a boy meet girl, a young woman meets a young man, and just building the relationship, something which is very private and very particular, we are also both representative of two paradigms in Jewish life, of two maybe very large vessels that sail in the ocean and do not necessarily see each other. And the fact that we also build our lives together professionally in our distinct careers, but also in our very similar careers, I think is something that we realize over time that is interesting to talk about, and therefore we were also willing to share this with anyone who wants to listen to our story. So thank you for paying attention to that, and hopefully it can be further developed in the breakout rooms. Naamah Kelman will go now to a different room in our house to attend the breakout sessions, and Rabbi Heaps, if you can give us some guidance how to move to the different groups. Thank you so much.
Actually, what I'm going to do is introduce the two helping to moderate the breakout groups. With Dr. Ezrachi, the Rabbi Lawrence Edwards, the Rabbi Emeritus of Or Chadash, and with Rabbi Kelman will be Rabbi Ike Serrata from Makom Sola Lakeside. What will happen is you will be assigned randomly to the two breakout groups. If you would like to move from one to the other, there is a place at the bottom that says breakout rooms, and you leave one room and join the other as you see fit. We're going to spend about 20 minutes in these breakout sessions, and then we'll join back together as a larger group. So Rabbi Heaps is going to get things into the breakout rooms.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for
Okay,
joining
all right.
us.
Got kicked out and now I'm back in, I think.
Perfect. Yep, we see you.
All right. So thank you to Rabbi Kelman, to Dr. Ezrachi. Thank you to our colleagues, Rabbi Sarada and Rabbi Edwards. And we have, I think, just a few moments. The issues are very poignant. One of the things that has come forward both in the presentation as to the large group and in the breakout sessions as well is the concern about the fact that we are in one case the word was nuance that was used and the lack of nuance, and that I would also describe it as the desire not to simplify, to complexify, to understand that there are real issues, there are real challenges, and that it's not age specific, and that we need to find more ways to inspire people to connect with Israel, not to guilt them into supporting Israel, not to use the old stories. You know, it's necessary. The whole world hates us, and Israel is the only safe place for us. And to only look at the fictionalized account of what we get in the States, and for the feeling to be that the diaspora is not an afterthought to Israelis, the desire to feel connected, and the desire to feel listened to and seen, that the desire that Rabbi Kelman and Dr. Ezrachi have to listen and to work with together. We need to broaden that pool of people, and to have more and more Israelis feel that same desire to engage in the difficult questions, and to not just give pat answers, but to really listen and to understand, and to have some empathy for how difficult and how challenging it is for so many to connect with an Israel that is imperfect, and is struggling as we are here in the United States with very real issues of racism, misogyny, of political turmoil, and so a lot of the questions have been around that, and the concerns that we have are real. And so I wanted to see if there were a few questions to address in this, and yeah, I need more time, exactly. So I wanted to just make a space for a moment or two if there are questions that we wanted to address as a larger group that we could give to Rabbi Kelman and Dr. Ezrachi. It's a lot. Yeah. So, one of the questions that's come forward is in looking at this new government, which looks very different than any other government we've seen, does it inspire hope, or is it met with a kind of a ho hum, or what is the reaction of Israelis to what's happening politically?
Well, of course, because it's political, it depends on the viewer,
who you ask.
I would say that and clearly Israel is split pretty much again in the middle between the right and the left, and it's also gets complicated because the Palestinian Israelis who tend to be on the left, but they're not exactly part of the Jewish left. But in general, I would say that there's a sense that this new government, aside from the question of who should be in power, is bringing a new spirit of collaboration somewhat depoliticization, which is obviously a contradiction in terms, but in the ability to focus on what is good for society rather than what is good for me as a politician, that there's a sense of collaboration between members of the cabinet who represent different ideologies, but are willing to work together for the common good. So actually, and there's a lowering of the flames of social tension that are felt pretty much all over. So in that sense, it's good. How long will it last? And will we go back to the very tense political divides that we experienced until just a few months ago? Still, the jury is out, and we can also end the term of a government here before the formal date, so it can actually break down as we are talking.
And the
What's your
fact,
take?
I would just say, the fact that we have a Minister of Diaspora Affairs, Nachman Shai, who views himself as a liberal Jew, is remarkable. That office for many decades is held by an Orthodox member of the Knesset who tended, of course, to support his people and her people. And finally, we have someone who really wants, actually, for years we couldn't get to the Hebrew Union College, different ministers, different politicians. And Nachman Shai came for the opening week of our Year in Israel students to address them, because he just came from an American campus. And probably the most moving thing he said to them, I want to come back at the end of the year. I want to see what you've learned. I want to hear. So the fact that first of all, I hope he gets to the end of the year, the government. But the fact that you have him, that you have Gilad Karib, for me, is an incredible statement of the success, again, of the grassroots. Please, I want to say, read as much as you can, be well informed, but know that even some of our more, elite papers tend to sensationalize and show the extremes, and pay attention to the grassroots in Israel, the NGOs doing the work day after day for coexistence, for peace, for pluralism, for civil rights, for protecting women and the weak. You don't see those but it is, they are happening. That is the Israel also, not just what you read in the news.
I will add two symbols of this new time. One is the fact that the Prime Minister of Israel, who I did not vote for, is an Orthodox Jew. I think that in itself is a very important message of the mainstreaming of Orthodoxy into real life. So Orthodoxy is not only a parochial sect of Judaism. It is something that can deal with everything that has to do with economy, climate, society, international relations, and nothing will block or will prevent an Orthodox politician from leading the entire country. And that is, I think, a very important statement. The second thing is the number of women in cabinet. There was a wonderful visual comparison when Angela Merkel came to Israel in one of the previous visits. Netanyahu took her to meet the top business community of Israel with the
high tech, the titans of high tech,
the startup nation message. And it was Angela Merkel with her, I don't know, orange suit, and maybe 20 men with Netanyahu who represented the business. So she asked, where are the women? And now when she came again about a week or so ago, Bennett brought to the picture the 9 members of the cabinet who represent different ideologies, but all women. So it was Angela Merkel, Naftali Bennett, and the 9 members of the cabinet in one frame. And I think it said it all. Orthodox Prime Minister, 9 women in the cabinet representing different ideologies and working together. Hey, we need some good news to take us into the next stage, and I think we have it.
So there was a question from Rabbi Fournier. The question of the direction Israeli and African American Jews and Jews from Africa, and how that relates to the questions that we've been discussing, and we've been mention of racism and Black Lives Matter and the struggles in Israel. And perhaps you can speak to that for a moment.
I'll just say something about the terminology here, and maybe Naamah can relate more to the content. I would say in general, the discourse of people of color is not something that Israelis know how to relate to in terms of the terminology. We don't use the term color here in the same way, even though once Ethiopian Jews became a known and noticeable community in Israel, which is a relatively new development, only from the 1980s, then the issue of color did come into the Israeli discourse. But when we talk about diversity, usually our range of diversity is religious and secular, Mizrahi and Ashkenazi, Jews and Arabs. These are the sets of terms. And when the American culture started building up a new discourse on that is based on the range of colors, people of color, and then Jews of color, Israelis are looking at this saying, what is this all about? I teach this, though, so this is something we need to help bridge in terms of cultural differences that as we discuss all the time. What's your take on?
No, I would say there is a growing awareness of what it means to be a Jew of color in the United States. I mentioned in my breakout group this 4-part TV series called The New Jew. It really focuses on the diversity in American Judaism and Jews of color. It's an Israeli
people in my group. This was an Israeli TV series.
It's a comedian who actually falls in love with American Judaism and the diversity. And he very much features Jews of color, which is, again, extraordinary and new. Of course, as Elan mentioned, I think we are also beginning to experience the important impact of Ethiopian Aliyah and the racism they've encountered. So again, and there's a whole question: are Mizrahi Jews from North Africa, are they considered Jews of color? So it's a different vocabulary here, but there is growing awareness about these different vocabularies and different identities.
Yeah. Thank you. I just, there's a question, I'm not sure that I understand it exactly here. Does Israel have a BDS problem?
You mean, is it our problem or is it Jews, an American Jewish problem?
Well, I think, yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that's where it's coming from. Is this something that Israelis are concerned about? Are you concerned about the boycott and divestment movement?
Well, I would say that in terms of economics, the answer is no. It doesn't have any economic implication. I think it's more our concern that Israel as a story, as a concept, is being questioned and attacked on it in terms of its raison d'etre, its legitimacy for existence, and that is something that Israelis are troubled by. And also, we empathize with people in Jewish communities around the world who have to kind of bear the consequences of this climate. Primarily, Jewish students in universities and the likes. That for them it could be even a daily experience from their co-students, from their faculty, and so forth. So, but on the level of does it affect our lives, I would argue no.
Yeah.
That's the question.
We could,
We're still
thank
eating
you.
Ben and Jerry's here, so I guess not. So.
Okay. All right. On that note of ice cream, and to end with some sweetness in our thoughts. And we just want to express our gratitude to the two of you for being with us and for sharing your story and helping us to continue to talk about how we can strengthen the relationship between Israel and the diaspora, how we can mutually support one another, what we can learn from Israelis, what Israelis can learn from us in this, and perhaps in helping us with the problems that each of us face uniquely in our own communities. So hopefully we can continue this dialogue. We'll find ways. I understand you're going to be in town for a wedding coming up, and we wish you Mazal Tov on that as well. And thank you to the 36 congregations, communities that came together. Talk about a demonstration of peoplehood. The fact that we could all come together in this way is pretty amazing. Thank you to all the partners, and Aliyah Cheskis Kotel, thank you for helping us put all of this together, and wish everyone here in the States a good evening, and wish the two of you a good morning. And hopefully we can meet again, but next time in person. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Rabbi Cohn, Rabbi Heaps, so many of you. And
להתראות.
Monica.